So I don't normally do gear videos, but I got this tempera from Beetlecrab, which I think is just like 4 guys in Prague. And I've been really inspired by it. I think it's really unique. They're also clearly a pretty small company, and I'd love to give some attention to them in a pretty small way. But mostly I just think it's really inspiring. A lot of gear either does a version of what everything else does, or it does something so unique that it's kind of hard to coax musical ideas out of it. It just ends up sounding weird. And this is both very unique, but also most importantly, musical. It is not hard to get very musical ideas to come out of this. And once you start playing around with it, it starts to feel like the possible templates are kind of limitless. So I'm going to do a really quick review. This is going to be aimed at sort of non-gear nerds. So if you don't know much about this stuff, but you're kind of curious, just please keep watching. Okay, so our basic premise is we have this 8x8 grid, right? And so each column represents a sample of audio that's up to 11 seconds. So for example, you can see on column 2 here, I have a piano sample, which sounds like this. Now, I think the easiest way to think about how to play this thing is actually to compare it to a guitar or another stringed instrument like a violin. So on a guitar, you generally need 2 actions, right? You need to pluck a string and you need to hold down a fret. The tempera is more or less the same thing. You need to play a note. You can see there's a little 1-octave chromatic keyboard at the bottom here. And then you use something called an emitter. So the emitters are really where the fun and uniqueness of this thing lives. Basically, you put it on a section of the grid. So if you imagine that the audio sample is traveling down each column, this corresponds to the part of the sample that's on that column. So then the emitter tells that part of the sample how to behave. So there's all sorts of ways that you can change what this part of the sample does. Like you can change the timing, you can change how long or short the grains or section of that sample are. And you can even tell it to start borrowing and mixing from neighboring parts of the grid, which I'll show you. So right now you can see that we have 4 emitters to play with, which are different colors. And playing with this, I found that's more than enough. So let's go back to that opening piece that I did. So let's go through how I crafted it. On track 1, I have a sample of my voice. So yeah, really silly sample. But I told the pink emitter to have a really high grain density, which means that there's a lot of iterations of that section of sound all at once. And it sounds really ambient and airy because of it. The next one is the piano sample that we went over earlier, and I've told the blue emitter to borrow from lots of segments of the entire sample. So you can hear that it's constantly evolving and changing because it's randomly selecting from different parts of the sound. You can also see it. On the next track, I also have a field recording that I took of cars going past in the rain, and it sounds like this. And then the next one, I have a string section from an old advertisement just to get some graininess and stuff. The last sample I have is a rhythmic mallet. So I told the green emitter to play snippets to a tempo, so I would get a little bit of rhythm and break up just the kind of sort of ambient airiness. So anyway, this is just a really small example of the many, many things that you can do with this. You can play with rhythm in all sorts of interesting ways. You can do far beyond just the sort of ambient stuff that I've been doing. But yeah, it's a really incredible machine. You could say it's a granular synth or a sampler, but it's way more creatively designed than any other granular synth or sampler I've ever seen. It is totally worth it. It's a really unique idea. I definitely want to support these guys at Beetlecrab, and you should too if you're interested. They're doing really great work.